Character death is an integral part of most tabletop role-playing games. While it is easy to stay alive in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, it was fairly easy to stay dead in 1st edition. Let's talk about it. Okay, so I have here notes that I jotted down from both editions of the game so that I didn't have a whole bunch of books all over the place. So let's talk about the differences between how clerics work in general terms for both 5th and 1st edition, and how staying alive in 5th edition was a lot easier than it was in 1st edition. So first off, one of the main differences is 1st level clerics in 5th edition get 4 cantrips and 2 1st level spells, and 1st edition clerics got 1 1st level spell. Cantrips didn't exist in the original game. They were introduced in our Unearthed Arcana, but in the original core books, there were no cantrips for clerics. And of course, one of the cantrips for the 1st level 5th edition cleric is Spare the Dying, which will allow you to stabilize a creature that is hit 0 hit points so that they don't go into death saves. No such thing existed in 1st edition. When you hit 0 hit points in 1st edition, your character was dead. In 5th edition, when you hit 0 hit points, you go into death saves. 3 successes, you come out. 3 fails, you die. So you have a lot of time, if your character reaches 0 hit points, for somebody to stabilize you, either through a skill check or the cleric's Spare the Dying cantrip. There are a number of ways to make sure that your character becomes stable and doesn't actually die when they reach 0 hit points. 1st level clerics in 1st edition, like I said, only were able to cast 1 1st level spell, and of course, what did most of them choose? Cure Light Wounds, which restored 1 to 8 hit points when used, and then that was it. Until they rested, they had no other spells to cast at 1st level until the next game day. Clerics in 5th edition have many more choices for what they can do even at 1st level, especially if they take the life domain, which now gives them access to heavy armor, empowered healing spells. You basically become a battlefield medic if you take the life domain. Cleric domains did not exist in 1st edition. So you were stuck with your 1 measly Cure Light Wound spell. That was it. 1st edition was very deadly for 1st level characters, and it didn't get any easier really until clerics were getting higher up in level. Not quite the same for 5th edition, where by the time a cleric in 5th edition reaches 5th level, they have access to Revivify. And if they're able to get to a downed party member, someone who's actually dead, within a minute, cast Revivify, that character then comes back with no detriment to the cleric at all. They can just cast that spell, boom, that person comes back with 1 hit point and everything's good to go. Mostly, unless they've lost body parts. They don't regenerate body parts. But no such thing existed in 1st edition for clerics. Clerics in 1st edition didn't get access to any type of what we would think of as any type of resurrection spell until 9th level, when they got Raise Dead, which was a 5th level spell. Same as it is for 5th edition. The biggest differences, though, really when you start looking at the resurrection spell between the two. The 5th edition cleric's resurrection spell is a 7th level spell, which means it's available to them at 13th level. Upon casting, the cleric does suffer some penalties. Mainly, they cannot cast spells, and certain things they have to roll at disadvantage until they complete a long rest. The 1st edition cleric, however, suffered much more penalties upon casting a resurrection spell. First off, the resurrection spell in 1st edition was also a 7th level spell, but cleric spells only went up to 7th level in 1st edition. There were no 8th or 9th level spells. So the resurrection spell would be available to clerics once they reached level 16 if their wisdom was 18. If their wisdom was lower than an 18, that resurrection spell wasn't available to them until level 17. So that's a big difference between the two editions. That's a 4-level difference. Also, first edition clerics couldn't do any combat or cast any spells until they rested 1 full day per level of whatever it is they resurrected. So if that was a level 1 character, they would have to rest an entire full day, 24 hours. They couldn't do any combat or cast any spells. If it was a 5th level player, 5 full days before they could do any combat or cast any spells. The other thing about resurrection in 1st edition was that whoever you were trying to resurrect needed to roll against the resurrection survival percentage table. If they failed that roll, they weren't resurrected. So there was no guaranteed chance of you weren't guaranteed that the resurrection was even going to work in 1st edition. So, you know, it was I don't like using the word brutal because it's how the game was set up back then. And when your character died, you had, when I say died, I mean reached 0 hit points. Your choices were very limited in what would happen next, short of, you know, a resurrection spell, alter reality, or like a wish spell. You really didn't have much. 5th edition gives you so many other chances for survival after reaching 0 hit points, falling into death saves, the revivify spell, raise dead, resurrection, true resurrection, because 5th edition's spells go up to 9th level, and at 9th level there is a true resurrection spell. So yeah, it's very different. Clerics operated very differently between the 2 editions, and it's part of the reason why, you know, we all joke that when you go to a 1st edition game, you bring a stack of characters with you, because the chances that your 1st level character was even going to survive your gaming session was low, 50-50. I don't know. You brought extra characters with you, and we didn't become attached to our characters so much as newer players do playing 5th edition. We could get attached to our characters, sure, if you wound up surviving long enough to get to level 10 or whatever, and then for some reason, you know, you suffered a death. That could be painful. That could really hurt, because it was a lot harder to level up and get to that point. And if your character died, it was a real letdown, you know. But yeah, some big differences between the two. Chances for survival in 5th edition, high. Chances for survival in 1st edition, low. But that didn't mean that the game was unplayable. It was certainly playable. You just had to focus a lot more on your team mechanics and playing together as a team, and really coming up with good ways to survive. And that often meant running away from combat or not engaging in combat if you weren't ready. So, now that's my 2 cents for this D&D Minute. I know it's been a while. It's been a minute since I've done D&D Minute. But here we are. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these, so stay tuned. I think the next one is I'm going to talk about the nature of evil in D&D. Got some thoughts about that one. So stay tuned for that. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and have a great day.